You've said these words to me hundreds of times over the years. A marriage should have equal parts love, trust, and respect. I don't trust Amy, and she sure as hell doesn't respect me. Eileen wanted to know, will you be fair to Amy in the divorce? According to divorce laws, I have no choice. But you know me. I'm not going to make this any more difficult for Amy and our family than it needs to be. What about the girls? Frank wanted to know. Yesterday afternoon, I was on campus and we talked. The girls know that I am filing for divorce, and they know the reason. They're not happy with Amy, but I don't think anyone is happy with her. It may take a little time, but they will come to their senses. I promise. I have no right to ask. I interrupted Eileen and said, you can ask me anything. I'm divorcing Amy. I have no intention of divorcing you and Frank, and I hope that we can continue our friendship and relationship. Tears flowed from Eileen's eyes as she asked, please talk to Amy. I will do so, I promise. But I'm not going to talk to her today, and probably not for the next few days. But I will talk to her. Mary Beth Johnston was Amy's close friend for many years. Their relationship could have been closer, but I've been wary of Mary Beth and her husband Phil since we met. Mary Beth and Phil had an open marriage. Although they did not actively involve singles and couples in their chosen lifestyle, they were not secretive either. They often told 21+ rated stories about their X-rated activities. There were a few occasions over the years when Amy's interest in swingers parties and friends with benefits relationships made the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. But in the end, I trusted my wife completely. I can't believe you treat Amy like that. Yes, she made a huge mistake, but she's sorry. You need to put on your big boy pants and get over it. Go and have sex with some chick if you want, but don't do anything stupid. That was Mary Beth's opening salvo as she plopped down on the chair across from me in the restaurant. I'm not going to do anything stupid, I promise. Mary Beth looked at me doubtfully and said, Amy was under the impression that you were seeking a divorce. I'm seeking a divorce. The documents will be submitted on Wednesday. Filing for divorce is not stupid. This is what normal people do when they want to get rid of their lying, cheating slut wife. Before Mary Beth could continue, I asked, you've known me almost as long as Amy has known me. I knew all this time about your open marriage. When did I give any indication that I would accept an open marriage or an unfaithful wife? Mary Beth was stunned and said, not addressing anyone, this is such a nightmare. My immediate response was, this is a nightmare. This is a nightmare for Amy, for me, our children, family, and friends. Mary Beth, this is about to become a nightmare for you and Phil, too. Coming to her senses, Mary Beth snapped, of course, this is a nightmare for Phil and me. We have all been friends for many years. I simply smirked at Mary Beth as my threat went over her head. What? She asked. What followed was excitement. What? I had a private detective who was investigating Amy's suspicious behavior. Continuing to advance, Mary Beth replied, yes. So what? He caught her cheating. The private investigator's report lists the contents of all text messages between you and Amy over the past 6 months. Mary Beth was trying to process the information when I said, I know Mike was a member of your swingers group before he got married. I know you told Amy he has a big man tool. When you found out he was working with Amy, you told her to have sex with him. I know Amy has been keeping you posted on their weekly dates. I know every fucking nasty detail, you pathetic bitch. Mary Beth jumped up and said, listen, Chris. Before she could continue, I said, every action has a consequence. The consequence of Amy's infidelity is divorce. The consequences for you and Phil won't be as bad, but I'm going to do everything I can to ruin your life. How the hell are you going to do that, asshole? Smiling for the first time, I said, I'm glad you asked. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I pointedly unfolded it and said, I'm going to send this email to several people you and Phil know. Mary Beth reached across the table and snatched the paper from my hands. She read, Topic: Mary Beth and Phil Johnston ruined my marriage. Friends, my name is Chris Harrington. I have been married to Amy Harrington for almost 25 years. Except for the last few months, my marriage has been perfect, at least for me. Due to the direct impact of Mary Beth and Phil Johnston's open marriage, my wife cheated on me, and I am filing for divorce. A 25-year marriage was flushed down the toilet. I am writing this letter as a warning so that other marriages will not be ruined by Mary Beth and Phil's cavalier attitude towards marital fidelity. My wife cheated with a swinger friend of Phil and Mary Beth. Mary Beth encouraged the relationship and told my wife Amy that she would never forget it. Mary Beth is right. My wife will never forget her affair because it led to the breakdown of our marriage and the destruction of our family. Whether you have a personal, business, or social relationship with the Johnstons, please be aware of their complete disregard for marriage vows and their willingness to sabotage your marriage. Perhaps if I had chosen our friends more carefully, Amy and I would not have gotten divorced. Sincerely, Chris Harrington. Mary Beth hissed, "You bastard. We will sue you if you send this to anyone." I chuckled and replied, "My lawyer reviewed the email and text messages from the private investigator's report. He concluded that everything in the email was true." "Who the hell are you sending this to?" "I have an email list of every teacher and administrator in your school district, as well as members of the Board of Education. I have 38 names and email addresses of employees at Phil's company. Of course, there are over 300 people working there, but I suspect the email will be passed around. Members of your country club and church will receive a copy. There are several other organizations that you or Phil are involved with. They will also receive copies." Mary Beth sat with her mouth open. I told her, "You can keep this copy for yourself so Phil can see exactly what is being sent. Have a nice life, you disgusting piece of shit." As part of the private investigator's report, I was informed that Lucy Brooks, the wife of Michael Asshole Brooks, took her children to play at Willowbrook Park every Saturday morning. At the park, she and her children met with the usual group of mothers and babies. Recognizing me and my greeting, Lucy said, "Chris, I haven't seen you since the office holiday party. What a pleasant surprise." "Good to see you, Lucy." 7 mothers stared at me as I continued. "I admit that our meeting was not accidental. I hope we can talk privately for a few minutes." Lucy nodded happily and said, "Of course, certainly." But after a moment, she noticed that my behavior did not correspond to her cheerful mood. She asked, "Chris, this is all—" She stopped and stared at me as the first glimmer of understanding appeared on her face. Lucy paled noticeably. Her friends' friendly faces showed either concern for Lucy or anger that I had somehow upset their friend. "Are you okay?" asked the plump blonde sitting next to her. Lucy did not immediately answer her friend and came out of a short trance only when the second mother sharply asked, "What's going on?" I'm fine. And to me, "I guess we need a little privacy." That would be best. There is a high probability that this will not happen. A slender and very attractive red-haired girl jumped to her feet, her angry gaze darting back and forth between Lucy and me. "Chris, this is my overprotective older cousin, Aggie. Aggie, meet Chris Harrington. Chris's wife and Mike work together. I suspect Chris wants to talk to me about the female intuition issues you think I'm imagining." "Ladies, Aggie, how about Lucy and I sit at the picnic table under the tree?" I pointed to a place 15 meters away from us. This should give us the privacy we need without being too far away. Lucy stared blankly at the ground for several moments. Silent tears streamed down her cheeks as she began to rise to her feet. Aggie ran up to her cousin and hugged her tightly, and both women began to sob together. When they parted, Aggie's angry look turned to sadness when she saw my wet eyes. I told Aggie, "I didn't just bring bad news. I'm stuck in the middle of this mess with your cousin." With Lucy by my side, we set off. After walking just a few steps, Lucy stopped, turned around and said, "Aggie, will you take the children home with you?" She replied, "Of course, Lucy. If necessary, can they stay for the weekend?" Aggie smiled sadly and nodded. Lucy and I were sitting across from each other at the picnic table, and I asked, "How long have you known?" Sighing, Lucy said, "Unfortunately, this is not my first rodeo. We got married a little later than most and had children almost immediately. After our second child, Mike had a vasectomy. His first romance began 6 months later. The second began a year after our first skirmish. This is the third strike. I suspected things had gone wrong within a month. I'm struggling with the thought of divorcing Amy. I know this will be the end result, but I constantly doubt myself. Can you tell me why you stayed with Mike after his first 2 affairs?" "Mainly because of the children." "Oh shit. This is entirely because of the children. I grew up raised by a divorced, angry mom and a dad who came over once a week. I didn't want this for my children. I still don't want to, but this is their future. Luckily, I have a strong family in the area and will get a lot of help." I guessed what Lucy's answer would be and nodded in understanding. I asked, "Do you know why Mike cheats?" It was Lucy's turn to nod. "He takes pleasure in turning good girls into bad ones." I wasn't a virgin when we got married, but I was very naive when it came to sex. Mike was my lover and teacher. He had high expectations of me and rewarded me, mostly with incredible climaxes when I lived up to his expectations. I love being his slut, but I want it to be in a loving and faithful marriage. Lucy continued, "Do you have proof?" I pulled out a thick envelope and handed it to her. "I would like to suggest that you give the evidence to your lawyer and not look at it. Mike and Amy are not very nice to us during most of their meetings. There's nothing there but a broken heart." "What made you suspect Amy?" I chuckled and said, "Obviously, Mike had the same hopes for Amy. Like a good dog, she enjoyed the tricks she learned and shared them with me. While we were sitting here, I decided to stay at Aggie's house for the weekend. I know it's a lot to ask, but could you take me home so I can pack my things for a few days?" Before I could agree, Lucy said, "I have to warn you. Mike will be home. No offense, but I'm not worried about your asshole husband. I'm glad to take you home." Having agreed with Aggie, Lucy returned to me, and we headed to my car. The drive to her house was mostly silent. When we pulled out onto her street, she pointed to an SUV parked on the side of the road and said, "Pull next to that truck." I did as I was told and watched as Lucy waved to the driver. She looked at me, pointed ahead, and said, "This is a white Colonial, 5 houses down and to the left." As I pulled into the driveway, the SUV pulled up behind me. Mike was in the middle of the front lawn, pushing a lawnmower. Everything happened quickly. Mike waved to Lucy as she got out of my car. The 2 women quickly got out of the SUV. They squeezed Lucy between them and led her to the front door. A very large man walked behind the women. After they entered the house, the man stood in front of the entrance, protecting them. An older man got out of the SUV at the same time I was getting out of my car. He walked up with his hand outstretched and said, "I'm Larry Green. Lucy is my daughter." I stood in the open front door of my car with my hands on the hood and looked across the car as Mike walked towards me. "Chris? Chris Harrington? What is Lucy doing to you?" Mike was visibly shaking and pale. "I met her in the park this morning. I had a package, a very large package, from my private investigator that I wanted to share with her." Before Mike could answer, Larry said, "You're a piece of shit, Mike. You were born a piece of crap and you will die a piece of crap. You just lost the only useful and worthwhile part of your worthless life." "This is all bullshit," Mike yelled. He turned, ran to the front door and shouted, "Stay out of my way, Georgie!" I guessed that Georgie was the giant who was now sitting on the top step of the landing by the front door. The man didn't move a muscle until Mike was ready to walk past him, and then with the grace of a cat, the man jumped to his feet and placed both hands on Mike's chest. A second later, Mike was lying flat on his back, the wind knocked out of him. Larry looked at me questioningly. I told him, "It looks like Mike slipped." Larry nodded and said, "Yes, that's what it was like for me." Eventually, Mike staggered to his feet. He turned and shouted, "It's all your wife's fault. She came for me. Everyone knows she's just a slut." "I can't argue with you, Mike. Amy is a slut, and she's not my problem anymore." I laughed sadly at Mike and was afraid that my emotions were about to fail me. I didn't want that asshole to see how hurt I was. At that very moment, Larry put his hand on my shoulder. He squeezed, and a stream of energy flowed into me. "You'll make a great couple, Mike. Amy knows you're a cheater, and you know the same about her. What do you think will come of this?" "I don't want this bitch." I laughed again and replied, "I think she's lucky. She already has enough problems to be saddled with an asshole like you." I reached out and shook Larry and told him, "This asshole is not worth my time or energy. I'm leaving. Take good care of Lucy. She seems like a wonderful woman." 2 weeks passed, Amy was charged, and her lawyer contacted mine. Life has returned to a new and miserable normal. When I checked my voicemail at lunch, I found a voicemail from my mother-in-law. "Hello, Chris. This is Eileen. I'm calling to remind you of your promise to arrange a conversation with Amy. I'd consider it a personal favor if you called her. Thank you. I love you." I gritted my teeth and dialed my home number with a sigh, knowing Amy would be at work. I left the following message. "Amy, this is Chris. I stayed at Stacy's family home on the lake. If you want to come over for lunch on Saturday, I'll make sandwiches. Can we talk? Meet me at the picnic table in the backyard at noon." Thanks for meeting with me, Chris. Lunch looks delicious. Thank you. Amy and I sat across from each other at a picnic table by the lake. Although she didn't have that glow that I've seen every day for the past 2 decades, Amy still looked good. "Good to see you, Amy. Thank you for coming." Amy looked around and replied, "It's so calm here." I agree. When I was thinking about new living conditions, my first thought was to move to an apartment in the city center, next to my office. I think I've changed my mind and have my eye on lakefront property in the area. I didn't want my comment to hurt Amy, but I could tell she was immediately devastated. "Amy, Amy interrupted me with a wave of her hand. Her eyes filled with tears as she said, "You don't need to apologize. I'm too sensitive." She looked up from the table and continued, "I'm so scared." Her statement hung in the air, and I watched her carefully as she collected her thoughts. "I've been scared before. Many times. New challenges at work often paralyzed me. The challenges of raising 2 smart, athletic, and beautiful girls scared the living daylights out of me. But you were always there for me. I had my team, and I knew that together, we could conquer anything." Smiling, I remarked, "We did a good job, isn't it?" We smiled contentedly for a few minutes and ate our lunch. I filled Amy's half-empty glass and poured myself a second round of craft beer. I went to a psychoanalyst. Amy sighed and continued, "This is an incorrect description. Dr. Poplar is amazing, and she is helping me come to terms with the end of our marriage and move forward as a team." "I'm happy for you, Amy. I hope you get the answers you need. I promised myself over and over again that I wouldn't ask you about reconciliation. Everyone told me it was impossible, but I have to ask, is there a chance that you can forgive me and we can be together again?" I took a deep breath and took a couple sips of beer. "These are 2 different questions, Amy. I've been thinking about the forgiveness half of the question since we agreed to meet today. I promised myself that I would try to forgive you. After thinking, I continued, it will take some time, and I don't know if it's possible, but I'm going to try. I will be honest and tell you that if I forgive you, it will be for the sake of the girls, our family, and myself, rather than for your sake." After draining half the remaining beer, I finished, "We will see each other often enough that I don't want to feel angry. But Amy, I'm not going to stop the divorce, and we're never going to get back together." Amy sniffled and nodded in understanding. She asked, "If I need help? If I need to talk? Can I call you?" I wanted to shout, "No, you're a fucking slut." Instead, I reached into the refrigerator, grabbed more beer, and filled my glass. Having regained my composure, I suggested, "Are you satisfied with the compromise?" Amy nodded hesitantly. I said, "Except in emergency cases, let's work through our lawyers until the divorce becomes final. After that, I will answer your calls." Our divorce was finalized 7 months later. I was sitting on the back porch of my new lakeside home on my first night as a free man. I was trying to decide whether I wanted the buzz of 2 high-alcohol drinks, the craft beer in the refrigerator next to my chair, or getting punched in the face by the bottle of bourbon on the table in front of me when my cell phone rang. I smiled when I saw who was calling and answered, "Hello, Amy. I'm really sad, and I need to talk to someone too." Stacy was right. One day, 5 years later, I woke up. The sky was a little bluer, and the birds were chirping a little louder. Life was getting better. Stacy has relocated to our corporate headquarters in Dallas and is currently the executive vice president of sales and marketing. She remained unmarried. Her children have grown up. After drinking a glass or two of wine, she admits that she still sometimes experiences the thrill of a steamy one-night stand. Julie graduated with honors from college and currently works as an engineer for a West Coast defense contractor. She is in a semi-serious relationship and is studying for her master's degree in the evenings. Julie has a great relationship with Amy and I and communicates with each of us weekly. We call Kate a mole because she has no privacy. After graduating from high school, she worked for a pharmaceutical company for 2 years and was then accepted into Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. She is engaged to another mole and a medical school student, and they spend their days and nights studying and taking classes. I talk to Kate weekly, but I initiate all calls. Kate rarely talks to her mother. My mom and dad are in surprisingly good health, considering they are getting older. They still live in the Hartford, Connecticut area, but due to the cold winters, they also have a tiny one-bedroom studio condo in Clearwater, Florida. They spend the cold months in Florida. Mom has a monthly Saturday lunch with Amy, but Dad rarely goes. Frank and Eileen are also doing well, although they each have several serious health problems. Frank and Eileen take turns dating Mom and Dad and inviting each other to weekly dinners. Mary Beth and Phil moved to the Midwest about a year after our divorce. Mike followed them out of town 6 months later. Good riddance. Assholes. Every single one of them. Lucy and her children are doing well. It took a while before she started dating, but once she jumped into the dating world, she became very popular among eligible bachelors. Lucy set very high standards for her gentleman friends and eventually found Mr. Right. They just celebrated their first anniversary. I guess, judging by the constant smile on each of their faces, that they still consider themselves newlyweds. Amy seems happy too. With the exception of a very tense relationship with Kate, most of her other relationships worked out. She's been dating a gentleman for 6 months now, and the last time I talked to her, she said he could be the one. I have my fingers crossed and hope she stays happy. And I'm doing well too. I took Stacy's place as division president when she left for Dallas. My responsibilities are okay. 2 years after my divorce, I met a familiar face. My cousin Lucy Aggie and I attended our mutual friend's daughter's graduation party. We talked several times throughout the day, and as the older people started to leave the party, Aggie grabbed my hand and said, "Let's go somewhere for a drink." I admit that Aggie can be a little insatiable. As a man over 50 who has sex 2 or 3 times a day, this is all I can offer my fiancé. Luckily, Aggie doesn't seem to mind. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.